Imagine waking up one day and finding out a company you've barely even heard of owns a huge chunk of your company.
Oh, yeah. That would be uh, pretty unsettling.
That's exactly what happened to the CEO of Daimler AG back in 2018,
Oh, wow.
the parent company of Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah, I can only imagine what was going through his head.
And the company behind it all,
Okay.
Geely,
Geely.
a Chinese car manufacturer that was already making waves by buying up brands like Volvo.
Yeah, they were on a roll.
But this time they had their sights set on something much bigger,
Uh-huh.
a piece of Daimler.
Wow. So they went straight for the top.
No, what's interesting is that Geely actually first tried to partner with Daimler.
Oh, so the traditional route.
Yeah, but Daimler wasn't interested.
Okay, so what did Geely do?
They got creative.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
They opted for a stealthy approach,
Okay.
quietly accumulating Daimler shares through the stock market.
So a silent but powerful entry.
Exactly.
I see.
Their goal was to gain enough influence to have a say in the company's direction without setting off any alarms.
Ah, very clever.
But we're talking about Daimler here.
Right, a global giant.
What kind of challenges did Geely face trying to pull this off?
Well, for starters, acquiring enough shares to gain a meaningful stake in a company like Daimler,
Yeah,
it wouldn't be cheap.
definitely not.
They needed a serious war chest
Uh-huh.
and a sophisticated strategy to avoid driving up the share price and attracting unwanted attention.
They had to be very strategic.
Absolutely, it was a delicate balancing act.
So what did their strategy look like?
They put together a team of financial experts,
Okay.
people with a deep understanding of international markets and mergers and acquisitions.
Sounds like they were assembling a dream team.
Yeah, you can say that.
Who are we talking about here?
Well, they had people like Li Donghui,
Okay.
a seasoned CFO with experience at BMW and Cummins,
Wow.
and Li Yifan,
Uh-huh.
who had a background in global mergers at JP Morgan Chase.
These are some serious heavy hitters.
They didn't stop there.
Oh.
They also brought in some former Morgan Stanley executives,
Like who?
Yi Bao and Dr. Dirk Notes.
I don't know that name.
Well, Notes had an interesting background.
Really?
He was involved in the Porsche-Volkswagen battle.
Oh, wow. The one that ended tragically.
Yep, that's the one.
So Geely was putting together a team for a high-stakes game of financial chess.
That's a great way to put it.
What were some of their moves?
One of their key tactics was using shell companies.
Shell companies.
Yeah, things like
Okay.
tenacious investment holdings and tenacious prospect investment.
Interesting names.
They set these up in Hong Kong to make it harder to track their activities.
So they were being intentionally secretive.
They were creating a layer of obfuscation, you could say.
Smart.
And of course, you can't forget about the financing.
Right, because a takeover of this scale doesn't come cheap.
No, it doesn't.
How did they manage that part?
They secured loans from Industrial Bank
Oh.
using a structure called foreign loan under domestic guarantee.
Interesting.
This minimized regulatory scrutiny.
Very clever.
It gave them the financial firepower they needed to operate under the radar.
Okay, so they had the team, the financing, and a way to stay hidden.
Yeah.
But how did they actually buy billions of euros worth of Daimler stock without sending the price through the roof?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
So instead of just buying shares outright,
Yeah.
they used a mix of direct purchases and option contracts.
Option contracts.
Yep, they worked with financial giants like Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Morgan Stanley to make it happen.
So instead of just buying the shares, they were also buying the right to buy them later at a set price.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this worked.
This way they could gradually build up their stake in Daimler without causing any sudden price spikes.
I see, it was a very carefully choreographed dance.
It was a masterful execution.
And they had to be extra careful because in Germany back then there was a 3% ownership disclosure rule. Right.
Once a shareholder's stake went over 3%, they had to go public.
Exactly.
So Geely had to stay under the radar until the very last moment.
It must have been incredibly complex.
Did they manage to pull it off?
They did. They timed their purchases perfectly
Wow,
and navigated the regulatory landscape with remarkable precision.
that's impressive.
But just when it seemed like everything was going according to plan,
Oh.
the market threw them a curveball.
What happened?
Daimler's stock price took an unexpected nosedive.
Oh no, that doesn't sound good.
This sudden drop had huge implications for Geely's carefully crafted strategy.
This sounds like a major turning point.
It was.
So what did this sudden drop mean for Geely's plans?
Well, that's what we'll get into in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I can't wait to hear more about this.
This unexpected twist put Geely's whole plan in jeopardy.
So Geely's in a tough spot.
Yeah, a really tough spot.
They'd managed to get all these shares in Daimler, and then suddenly the stock price plummets.
Right.
What'd that mean for their plan? Well, it was a big problem for them.
How so?
Remember, they borrowed a lot of money to make this happen.
Right, to finance the takeover.
When the stock price dropped, the value of their collateral...
The Daimler shares.
Exactly. Those shares plummeted too.
Okay, so it's kind of like when someone takes out a mortgage and the housing market crashes.
Yeah, like they suddenly owe more than the house is worth.
That's exactly what Geely was facing.
It's called a margin call.
Margin call.
Their lenders saw the value of their collateral drop.
Yeah.
And they wanted more money to cover the potential losses.
Yikes. That put Geely in a bind.
It did.
So what could they do?
Well, I mean, they could have admitted defeat.
Sold their shares at a loss.
Basically, give up on their ambitions with Daimler.
But that would have been a huge setback.
A very expensive one.
So what did they do?
Geely's financial team came up with a new plan.
Okay.
Something called a collar option.
Collar option?
Yeah, it's a way to limit potential losses, but still give them a chance to profit.
Options trading always makes my head spin.
I know it can be confusing.
Break it down for me. How did this collar option work?
Okay, so it involves buying and selling different types of options on the Daimler stock.
So instead of just betting on the price going up, they were hedging their bets?
Exactly.
So what exactly did they do?
They bought something called put options.
Okay.
And they sold something called call options.
What do those even mean?
So a put option,
Yeah.
it basically gives you the right to sell a stock at a specific price.
Even if the actual market price is lower.
Exactly. It's like an insurance policy against the stock dropping too low.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, a call option is the opposite. It lets you buy the stock at a certain price.
Regardless of the market price.
Right. And by selling those call options, Geely actually made some money.
Oh, I see. So they were creating a range
A collar.
where they could control their risk and reward.
If the price dropped too low,
The put options protected them.
and if it went too high,
They'd make money from selling the shares through the call options.
exactly, it let them ride out the volatility in the stock price.
This wasn't just buying and selling stock.
Not at all.
This was high-level financial maneuvering.
Using complex instruments to their advantage.
Did it work?
Well, we don't know all the details,
It's all pretty secretive.
but we do know Geely held on to their Daimler shares for over 5 years,
That must have been stressful.
especially with all the ups and downs in the market.
So they weathered the storm,
They
held on to their shares.
It seems like it.
But did they actually make any money?
Well, that's what we're going to find out in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, because surviving is one thing,
Right.
but they wanted to gain something from all this.
They had a bigger vision in mind.
Okay, so Geely survived the stock market roller coaster.
More than survive.
But they weren't just in it for the thrill ride, right?
No, they had bigger plans.
Did their big gamble ultimately pay off?
Well, the exact numbers are still a secret. But most experts believe that Geely made a tidy profit.
So they made money.
The stock price went up quite a bit over those 5 years. And they also got those dividend payments.
Right, so it was a financial win.
It was. But remember Geely's chairman, Lei Shufu? He had a much broader vision.
Oh yeah, he wasn't just looking for a quick buck.
Exactly. He saw this as a way to get a foot in the door at Daimler.
One of the biggest names in the car world.
Yeah, he wanted a seat at the table.
And remember, Daimler had already rejected their partnership offer.
Right, so this was their way in.
A pretty bold move.
It was a power play.
But did it actually work?
Well, they didn't have complete control,
Right.
but as the largest shareholder, they had influence.
They can make their voice heard,
Exactly. They used that influence to push for collaborations,
especially in the electric vehicle space.
which makes sense given Geely's own focus on EVs.
Definitely. Did any of these collaborations actually happen?
One of the biggest ones was the joint venture to build electric smart cars.
Oh, wow. So they actually made it happen.
It was a win-win for both companies.
How so?
Geely got to tap into Daimler's engineering and their brand,
Makes sense.
and Daimler got access to Geely's manufacturing muscle and their knowledge of the Chinese market.
So everyone benefited.
It wasn't always smooth sailing, though.
I can imagine merging two different company cultures must have been tricky.
There were definitely challenges.
But they made it work.
The partnership produced real results.
It's amazing how Geely took this huge risk
A really audacious move.
and actually came out on top.
It's a testament to their ambition and their strategic thinking.
What are the big takeaways from this whole story?
I think it shows how much the business world is changing.
The old roles don't always apply.
Exactly. Companies have to be willing to think differently,
To take risks.
to be creative.
Even the biggest companies can be disrupted.
If you have the right strategy,
Geely showed that.
they also showed the importance of being adaptable.
And of understanding how global markets are all connected.
They use resources and expertise from all over the world.
Navigating complicated financial systems and regulations.
It's a global game now.
This has been a fascinating look at Geely's incredible journey
From a risky stock market move,
to becoming a major force in the automotive industry.
they really shook things up.
It's a reminder that even in a world of giants,
There's always room for innovation.
always room for disruption
And with a clear vision,
and the courage to take a chance.
even the impossible can become possible.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the story of Geely and Daimler.
It was my pleasure.
We'll see you next time for another fascinating look at the world of business.